My mom had me when she was 30, so I thought, well, we'll just try having a baby, and it wasn't as easy as I thought it was. And it was interesting because, you spend so much of your 20s trying not to get pregnant, and then when you want to get pregnant, finding out that it's actually really hard is very frustrating.
I feel like that sentiment that you just heard is kind of the crux of this show. Whether you always wanted to have kids or having kids is a new goal for you, and whether you try to reach that goal through sex with a partner or through donor services or through surrogacy or adoption, the truth is that learning that it might not be so easy can be heartbreaking. I mean, I chose heartbreaking, but it can be frustrating, maddening, soul-crushing, all-consuming, life-altering. Well, today's guest, Laura, can tell you all about that. She and her husband lived it. With a frustrating, unexplained infertility diagnosis, Laura and her husband tried multiple fertility treatments before they found success. And today, she's going to share all of those experiences with us. I'm Dan Bolger with Progyny, and this is Infertility. Hello, and welcome to a very special episode of This is Infertility. Now, I call a lot of episodes very special, and I think that's warranted. These are real people sharing some of their most vulnerable moments with us and with the world. And they're doing it not for fame or fortune, but selflessly in order to help others who are experiencing similar things understand what it's like to go through these treatments and experiences. And so, yes, all of these episodes are special. But today gets an extra special distinction because this is actually our 200th episode. That's a pretty crazy thing for me to think about. 200 episodes means that we've been doing this for a while. This is our 8th year producing the show. But it also means that if you're listening to this and you're experiencing something related to fertility or family building, there's a really good chance that we've made an episode about it. So if you want to find those episodes, I know it can be intimidating to search through Apple Podcasts and find specific older episodes. So I want to offer a trick that I use whenever I need to look back at previous episodes about specific topics. I go to Progyny.com and I use the search feature on the top of the page. I punch in whatever keyword will get me there, so say endometriosis, and then I get a list of resources. And undoubtedly, you'll find several episodes of This is Infertility there to listen to. So that's a good way to do it. Anyway, let's dive in to Laura's story.
Hi, my name is Laura, and I am from Dallas, Texas, and I started my fertility journey about 10 or 11 years ago, and I now have two beautiful daughters, but it was a lot of hard work to get here.
Yes, Laura works at a hospital in Dallas, Texas, and like many, she and her husband didn't anticipate having any issues conceiving.
We met, we got married, and then I was about 30 when we started trying to have a baby, and I hadn't really thought I would have any issues because why would I? And all my friends were getting pregnant, and my mom had me when she was 30. So I thought, well, we'll just try having a baby. And it wasn't as easy as I thought it was.
At 30 and 31 years old, Laura was in a good position age-wise for trying to have a baby. But when it wasn't happening right away, she did what many do in that situation. And she started trying to track her ovulation. And that was when she hit her first hurdle.
It was really frustrating. When we first started trying to conceive, I used those over-the-counter ovulation test strips. And I noticed early on that they were, even though they say they're 99% accurate, I would test positive on those test strips twice a month, which doesn't make sense. So it was hard for me to, at home, try to time or trying to conceive with when my supposed surges were for ovulation. And my cycles were also a little bit longer than normal. So my cycles were 35 to 37 days, and it was just unpredictable when I was ovulating within that window. And so I talked to my obstetrician about it, and she actually prescribed Clomid, which was one of the first-line treatments at the time. And we ended up doing 4 cycles with Clomid at the lower dose, and then another 4 cycles of Clomid at a higher dose. And I never got pregnant in those 8 cycles. So we moved on to meeting with a fertility specialist.
Clomid is clomiphene citrate. It's a drug that can help with ovulation, but it can also come with some side effects like mood swings, discomfort, and nausea, as well as a high risk of multiples if it works. So doing 8 rounds is no joke. But as she said, after 8 rounds, she was back where she started. So her OB recommended she see a fertility specialist, a reproductive endocrinologist. When you see a fertility doctor, it all starts with an initial evaluation, where they ask a bunch of questions and do a few tests to get a picture of your reproductive health.
There wasn't ever really a good explanation for why I wasn't getting pregnant, which is very frustrating. Throughout my pregnancy journey, I've never really had a good diagnosis of why I can't get pregnant. It just was just not happening. When I was 31, I did my first round of IUI in October 2015, and then that didn't result in a pregnancy. We tried again in December 2015 for my second round of IUI, and then that did not result in a pregnancy. And then we tried a third round in January 2016 for our third IUI, which at the time was going to be our last chance before switching to IVF with this fertility specialist. And it was interesting. It was, of my 3 IUIs in that time period, it was my lowest chance of getting pregnant based on all the variables going IUI. And the fertility doctor even said, maybe we skip this month, or do you want to keep going? And I'd already done all the work and I was mentally there, and I was like, let's just do it. Let's just do the IUI. It's our third one. It was time. So this time, the previous IUIs, I had to do my IM injections in the trigger shots in the office, but because of the timing of this one, I actually had to do the trigger shot at home, and that was my first time doing an injection at home. And I had one of my very best friends came over, and she had a baby, and so I was like, my husband was holding her baby while she gave me the injection because she was a nurse, and we were afraid of doing the injection wrong. So she gave me my trigger shot. We went ahead and did the IUI, and I didn't think I was going to get pregnant. Everything was not in the cards that month. And so it was a Friday afternoon and Friday evening, and I was going to make margaritas for John and I. And I thought, well, I should take a pregnancy test just in case. I probably shouldn't have a margarita if I'm pregnant. And I took a home pregnancy test, and it came back positive, and I was shocked. And because it was Friday at 5, I couldn't do anything about it until Monday when the doctor's office opened. And I went and got my labs drawn, and sure enough, the IUI that had the worst chance of creating a pregnancy, actually, I got pregnant. And so I had a daughter 9 months later.
All told, they were trying for about 2 years, if I have that math right, and it took around 8 rounds of oral drugs and then 3 rounds of IUI to reach their goal. But of course, getting pregnant and having a baby isn't really where the story ends. For Laura, her experience as a new mom was far different than she ever anticipated.
Once we had the baby, I had really severe postpartum depression and anxiety that I was not expecting. And so family planning for another child just wasn't in the cards for a long time because I really wasn't even sure I wanted to go through the whole process again because my postpartum depression and anxiety was so severe. So we didn't freeze our eggs. We didn't really plan anything. I was kind of going to leave it to fate of, well, in the future, maybe if I get pregnant, if it's meant to be, it'll be.
Postpartum depression and anxiety is a very serious issue that you just can't sweep under the rug. If you're experiencing this now, it's important to communicate with your doctor. I'm extremely proud that Progyny offers a postpartum support program now as well. There are real options out there to help you through it, and you don't need to go through it alone.
When I had the baby, I remember what's really interesting to me. So many women say when they have the baby's put on their chest and they instantly feel love and they instantly feel this attachment and this wonderful miracle. And I vividly remember when my daughter came out of me, this baby that I had tried so hard to get, and I was so happy to be in my life. They put her on my chest, and my first thought was, what did we do? We just ruined our lives because we had freedom. We could do whatever we wanted. Now I have this tiny thing that I'm in charge of. I don't know how to keep it alive. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. So I was instantly disconnected and anxious. And from there, it just escalated because I could not sleep. I had postpartum insomnia. So I could not sleep. They say, sleep when the baby sleeps, but I could never do that because I was constantly thinking, well, the baby's going to wake up now, or now the baby's going to wake up in 10 minutes, or now it's going to be 20 minutes. And I didn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I lost all my baby, like the weight that I gained during pregnancy. And I didn't know at first that it was anxiety. And I knew a little bit of, what to expect with depression, but I'd never heard of postpartum anxiety. And I thought something was physically wrong with me. So I thought perhaps there was something like, happening in my body that something was physically wrong, that I had some sort of infection or some sort of physical thing that was causing these symptoms. But I was very fortunate. I work in healthcare and I work with doctors who told me, you need to go see your doctor right now. And so I actually ended up walking into my OB's office because they couldn't schedule me an appointment. But my friend who's a doctor was like, just go show up. You just have to go see them. So I showed up and my OB, of course, saw me and recognized right away that I was dealing with anxiety and depression. And so I got started on psychotropic medication, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medicine, but it takes 6 to 8 weeks for those medicines to become therapeutic in your system. So if you start the week after you've had a baby, you're already behind. And so it was a constant battle of trying to find the right balance of medications for 2 to 3 months before I started coming out of the darkness. And it was really hard because I'd worked so hard to have this baby and we wanted to have this family, but I was so disconnected with her and I was afraid to be alone with her. And I saw a lot of doctors and I had a therapist and we got through it, but it took 3 to 4 months. Probably that's, I know some women have postpartum depression for much longer than that. And I do think it was longer, but the worst of it was over within the first 3 to 4 months because I was so proactive of constantly seeking help and getting the right supports in place to help me get better.
Just a PSA, really. You heard her say that she got through it, and she did so by communicating with her doctor and by leveraging a therapist. We can't stress it enough, really. If you're experiencing any of the symptoms of postpartum depression or anxiety, or even if you aren't sure that you are, but you might be, you need to seek help. There might be some things in life that you can toughen out and go it alone, but this isn't one of them. When you're having trouble staying afloat, reach for the life vest. So it was a few years before Laura and her husband felt ready to try again.
When I was around 35, so about 4 years later, we decided I would stop taking birth control and see if, let's just see if we get pregnant. We'd done 3 IUIs for our first daughter, but let's just see if we can get pregnant naturally. And I didn't get pregnant and I didn't get pregnant. And so we thought, okay, well, once I was around 36, let's go see a fertility doctor. So we went to a different fertility doctor this time, who I was really excited about, really well-respected doctor in the community. My numbers were good. So my markers were good. I had a good egg reserve. My age was bad. It was working against me that I was now 36. But overall, there weren't any overwhelming factors that were playing against me getting pregnant. So he talked to me about different possible treatments that we could start with and whether we can start with IUI or go to IVF. At that time, I did not have any covered benefits. So we talked about doing IUI again. And what the doctor said that they no longer did Clomid. So I did Clomid on my first rounds of IUI, but they were using letrozole off-label because it has lower side effects and lower potential chances of having twins, which sounded great to me because I was not looking for twins. And so we went ahead and did an IUI in June of 2022, and I did not get pregnant. And then we did another IUI in August of 2022. And again, I did not get pregnant. I knew we could do 4 cycles of IUI before having to consider IVF. But in August 2022, when I'd done the first 2 rounds of IUI, we really weren't sure what we wanted to do because we were still trying to figure out, is this worth it? Do we want to go through the cost of IVF? Like, what should we do? Should we just go to IVF? How are we going to pay for IVF? And we took a bit of a break because it was taking a toll on me to go through all of this. And doing something that isn't natural. And I wasn't sure, like, should we have another child? We have one child. I'm grateful for my one child. Or do we pursue this? But then in September, I learned that my company was going to start receiving fertility benefits through Progyny, which was a game changer because that is such a burden on your family journey, having to pay for these costs. So I was super excited, and I knew they were starting in January of 2023. So we took a little break, focused on the family that we do have. And then in February of 2023, we did our third IUI. Again, I did not get pregnant. And based on all of our numbers and everything, the doctor suggested that we move to IVF. And since we had benefits now, it was a no-brainer that we would go that route. I liked the idea of being able to do genetic testing, given that I am older at this point and, my odds are higher of having lower egg quality and things of that nature.
So they went ahead with the round of IVF, retrieved some eggs, embryos were created in the lab. She was prepared for an embryo transfer. A chromosomally normal embryo was transferred, and
in September 2023, 6 weeks, I had a 6-week, 1-day positive flicker on the fetal heart. And it was shocking because I just did not think it was going to work. I had read so many things online, and I was looking at the data, and I was trying so hard not to get my hopes up that I was almost pessimistic about it. But it worked, and we got pregnant, and then we had a baby. So she's here now.
Yes, at the time of this conversation, Laura had a 13-week baby at home. Now, she'd been through a lot, and she'd reached her goal twice, but there was still one thing that was weighing on her mind. After having her first baby, she experienced debilitating postpartum depression and anxiety. So it's only natural that she was worried that it would happen again.
I was concerned going into this pregnancy that I would have postpartum depression and anxiety again. So I worked really closely with my OB. And given that I was much older when I got pregnant, so I was 39 when I got pregnant this time, since it took a couple of years for us to get pregnant. I worked closely with my OB and my maternal fetal medicine specialist on what I could take during pregnancy, and I stayed on my antidepressant at a very low dose. I took Zoloft through my pregnancy so that at least when I gave birth that I would be on something already and not be working against the 6 to 8 week timeline of getting a therapeutic medication in my system. So we knew that when I gave birth, we were going to increase my dosage of Zoloft the very next day, which we did. But I still suffered from postpartum depression and anxiety this time. And I'm 13 weeks postpartum right now. And I'm just now getting through and seeing the light again. My depression wasn't as significant this time. I felt much more attached to the baby, which was great. But my anxiety was very high. And it took a while of trying different medications, different therapies, and we're in a good place now that I'm on Lexapro, which was on a medication that I was on previously and had success with. So that's gotten my anxiety under control. And I also have a great therapist. And I've worked closely with my primary care doctor and my OB to make sure that I'm getting what I need to have a successful postpartum period. We knew going into it this time too, since I'd been through it before, what my potential weaknesses were or triggers for my anxiety, and how to have resources to help support me through this period. So we had more help at night. I also knew that eating was going to be a problem because it was last time, or I thought it might be a problem. So I had really big issues with nausea and just being unable to eat and having no appetite. So I had a big stock of Ensure and other supplemental drinks that I could drink. So at least I was getting nutrition and calories when I couldn't eat. And that helped a lot so that I wasn't starving myself. And I had resources to help me with sleeping and resources to help me with the baby. And so this period went much more smoothly than the first time.
And speaking of Progyny, Laura mentioned that IVF is expensive, but she had coverage from work that helped a lot. Well, yes, if you've listened to all 200 of our episodes, you'll have guessed that Laura's employer covers their members for fertility with Progyny.
It is life-changing. It's absolutely life-changing to be able to have this benefit and to be able to grow your family. And it may not, my story was relatively straightforward, given that IVF worked for us on the first try, but I know many people, it takes a number of egg retrievals and a number of embryo transfers, and having that resource from our company to say, it's okay, you can keep trying if you want to, is incredible.
It's life-changing. I work at Progyny, so of course I think it's great, but it's still always extremely refreshing to me when I get to hear someone who needed the benefit share just how impactful it really is. This really is life-changing stuff, and for us to play a role in it really puts everything into perspective. So I want to give a big thank you to Laura for joining us today and for sharing her story. And I want to thank you for listening. If you want to connect to us, you can do so on Instagram at This Is Infertility Podcast. If you want to follow Progyny, you can do so at Progyny Inc. Of course, if you're listening on a podcast app, please leave a rating and a review. This Is Infertility is brought to you by Progyny. Please remember this podcast is not intended to substitute for the personalized expert advice of your physician. I'm Dan Bolger, and this is Infertility.